Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
When you pick up some scratches, cause you want a fun break, the playful way you scratch is the next choice you should make. You can make your dog's leg kick and scratch with that. You could even grab a laser pointer and use your cat. You can build yourself a homemade scratching machine, or use a piece from your chess set. Go ahead, grab the queen. Scratch like a DJ with your record player. A cactus could scratch off that scratchable layer. Cause when it comes to scratching, there's a million playful ways. Thanks to scratchers from the California Lottery, a little play can make your day.
Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is writer and producer Ryan J. Brown. He is the series creator behind the new queer slasher series Wreck, which is currently streaming exclusively on Hulu. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. We're as we said a little bit before we started recording, I'm a huge fan of your show, and I'm not 100% through with it. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about it, but don't give me any spoilers about what's to come?
Yeah, I'll try.
All right.
Yeah. So Wreck, like you say, is a big, fun, queer, crazy slasher series set aboard a cruise liner. The show follows a character called Jamie Walsh, who his sister was working on the cruise ship and went missing, as happens constantly in real life on these cruise ships. Terrifying, uncharted territory. And so he goes on the ship, he assumes somebody's identity, goes on the ship to find out what happened to his sister. That's kind of the setup. It's really hard not to spoil anything, but as soon as he arrives, really, we realize, okay, this is a deeper conspiracy than what he maybe first thought, and lots of suspects and danger around every corner.
Yeah.
He's selling it. Yeah,
including a person or persons maybe in a giant duck mascot uniform. Who's my favorite?
Yeah. The duck haunts me my every waking minute. The duck was always supposed to sort of be a big thing in the opening. And really, I guess if you're like 4 episodes in, he doesn't really pop up that much.
No, he hasn't.
But yeah, he kind of, people love the duck. He's just the breakout star. He's the breakout star of the show.
It's iconic. It's an iconic design because it feels a little camp. It feels I don't know. It feels like this wildly out of place slasher idea, and I love that. And I'm curious though, because I've never been on a cruise, and I've never really thought about it, but
Neither
it is
have I.
kind of not, yeah. It's kind of dangerous out there. Have you ever worked on a cruise, or how did this idea of a cruise ship come to be?
So,
Because there's a lot of information
so
interspersed throughout.
I'm a complete fraud. I've never been on a cruise ship. I've been on like smaller. No, I haven't. Like a ferry doesn't count. But I've never been on a cruise ship. But know a lot of people that have worked on them. And when we were making the show, we spoke to a lot of people from all different all of the cruise ships. They have these weird hierarchies. They're kind of like high school ecosystems, which was just so fascinating to delve into. There is a kind of Lord of the Flies thing on there where everyone sticks together in their little groups, and it's kind of a microcosm of the world, but all condensed onto this horrible, garish, fantastically camp location. But yeah, cruise ships are fucking awful. And it's something that I thought maybe there would be more pickup about with the show, that people I was hoping there'd be more of a conversation about that. But unfortunately, the duck may have shit all over my social commentary. I don't know. He really exemplifies, I think, the cruise industry. He's this shiny mascot, which we all know a few companies that have those figures of fun. And actually, beneath the mask, there's something twisted and horrible going on. And I do think that is very much the cruise industry, for me personally. I have to be so careful what I say, but because they love to sue as well. It's like their favorite thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a piece once in, what was it, like New York Times, maybe? It said basically, if Donald Trump, or maybe he said this, I imagine he probably did, if he wasn't in the line of business he was in, he would have started a cruise line company a long time ago, which makes sense.
That does make a lot of sense.
It kind of is him personified.
Yeah.
And yeah, so again, I'm not trying to spoil the show, but as Jamie's search for his sister kind of intensifies and he falls down this rabbit hole, we kind of really examine, trying not to spoil it, that strange world of cruising.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed so far is basically Karen, the character of Karen, like this. Can
I just say, I called her Karen, kind of like, because the script I first started writing it maybe 5 years ago. Like Karens were kind of becoming a thing. It was kind of becoming the thing that it is now, but it wasn't. And everyone's like, "Oh, you called her Karen." I mean, that's such a like joke 3 years ago, but whatever. And I'm like, the script's been around a while. The same with the same with there are some comparisons to Squid Game often, and I'm like, I wrote this a long time before Squid Game, but people don't care, do they?
No, they don't. Well, and I was thinking about that too, because this came out. I mean, it came out in the UK last year, and we're of course getting it right now. But when it came out in the UK, and I was watching it, I had also seen Triangle of Sadness, and I was like, they're both exploring kind of this sort of tribalism on board and the different hierarchies and making sharp critiques about it. Because you mentioned that the duck might have kind of shat all over the kind of social critique that's laid in here, but I see it and I appreciate it, honestly. I think that's what makes it more interesting than just a regular slasher type of situation.
Thank you. I'm glad, because we were always aware, this is a show primarily targeted at a teen audience, and you have to toe the line, and you can't be kind of too, I don't know, preachy is the wrong word, but it's sort of everything that's in there is very much true. Like the fact that most cruise ships, nearly all of them, they have a mortuary on board. That's true. If they start giving out free ice cream, someone's dead, they run out of space potentially in the mortuary. That's a real thing. The mafia's on board, real thing. Ethnic groups tend to stick together. Usually the Filipino mafia are kind of the most powerful on board, and you don't kind of fuck with those guys. That's all true, and it kind of is tip of the iceberg. I could have put so much more in there, but I suppose it would have become more of a documentary.
We need more horror on cruise ships, I think. I think that is a very underutilized horror setting. I mean, we had Ghost Ship, obviously, but that's mostly after the fact. I don't feel like we have enough cruise ship horror.
We have like Jason Takes New York, but it's about like You kind of just want them to get off that fucking boat.
You do, and he just doesn't until the very last, like, third act almost, it feels like.
Awful. That was it was definitely a reference for us, and we were like, we don't want people to be begging for us to get off the boat. We need to make the boat, Those mega cruise liners, they are like cities as well.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, we weren't allowed to film on a real cruise ship. We got very close, super close, and then someone thought maybe they should read the script. And they were like, oh, I don't know if this is the greatest PR for us. So we built pretty much everything.
Oh, so this it was all sets?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
That weren't there's a scene in the opening, when she's kind of at the side of the ship, and then there are a few other moments where they're kind of convalescing at the side of the ship. That is a boat in a museum in Belfast.
Oh, wow.
And when they told me what the boat was, I was like, that's probably the worst omen I've ever known for anything. It's the boat that took the passengers out to the Titanic.
Oh, shit.
I was like, that bodes well for our show. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently, like, they didn't just kind of, I was picturing the James Cameron film where they all just walk aboard.
Right.
No, a smaller boat had to take them out to the big one. So yeah, that was the boat we used. So that was crazy. Walking around that boat, kind of, you could feel there was something there. There was a vibe that was deeply unpleasant.
Well, and I also love how queer the show is, and how it is very much about found family too. Like, there's obviously the slasher aspect, but I think something that I really loved was this queer found family aspect of queer people finding each other and finding like love and support when, their families maybe are not the most supportive, and finding an environment that, while is terrifying, that they can still be themselves, like more uniquely themselves. And I also really love that, because we're seeing more of it, obviously, but it's nice to see it again in like a slasher, like you said, maybe more aimed for younger audiences, but like a horror show like this, and having that be such a big part of the show is really important. And I really appreciated that.
Thank you. It was really important to me, like from the off. I remember there were questions asked. Like, oh, we love that there's a gay lead, but two gay leads, a gay and a lesbian together.
Dare you?
How dare you?
Two.
And we have an actress playing a trans character, but we don't talk about the fact she's trans. Why? I'm like, but I think everyone realized that actually, they build these things up in their heads, and why not? Why not? And there's a lot of reasons why. And yeah, I love Vivian and Jamie's friendship. That's been something
so good.
Like, it's really like refreshing, isn't it? To see,
it really is.
I suppose take sexuality out of it. Having a female-male friendship like that kind of on screen is rare. And
especially platonic, like a platonic friendship, like not something that's like a will they, won't they type of thing, but just like two friends that have found each other and are deciding to help each other out on this adventure. I love that. And I love this sort of, by episode 4, this kind of family that is developing around these characters, because that's as far as I'm in right now. With like Cormac, the person that Jamie is, taking his identity for, which, by the way, the fact that he is just strutting around basically in his underwear for a lot of the first episodes, I was like, that would, as a person in such a small ship, that would have made me so uncomfortable as a gay man, to be perfectly honest.
I have to admit, I made sure that was in the script. I'm shameless, but I thought, unless that's in the script, it might not happen. So yeah, that was a deliberate thing. I was like, know thy audience,
Yeah. Give me that tall drink of water.
That gang. I was very keen for, like, by the end of series 1, for there to have been that kind of Scooby gang formed, and for us to then go to other places with them, like in series 2, which we're working on now. And I love things like that. I love when you have those close-knit groups. And so yeah, it was really really nice. And there aren't many scenes where they're all together on the screen kind of plotting and Scoobying, but when they are, those are some of my favorite scenes. And I'm so glad that now in series 2 there's so much more of that. And the friendships are tested. And Jamie and Vivian's friendship is actually really tested in series 2. So
oh wow, okay. How far along are you in prepping for series 2?
So I'm writing the final episode now.
Oh no. Wow.
Yeah. We start filming in a month and a half, 2 months, I think.
Oh, dang. That's so exciting.
Really exciting. It happened really quick. It was amazing. We were kind of recommissioned for a second series before the first series aired, which kind of never happens. not
That's
with the
amazing.
BBC show. Yeah, it was like, wow, such confidence in the show. And that kind of show doesn't happen like, it doesn't happen very often in the UK anyway. Horror, they're very weird about it. And the response is very interesting. In America, I think overall, like the response has been very overwhelmingly positive, and it's been really nice. Whereas in the UK, it was a little more mixed and a little bit more, I don't know what it is. People have a rod up their ass about horror.
It's so weird because here in the States, like horror television is so hugely popular. It seems like
this is what I keep saying here. I'm like, it's the biggest genre on TV.
It really is.
And if you look at the box office as well, it's like the thing that's bringing people into cinemas.
Scream 6 just now. Like
I was yelling at my radio the other day because someone was like, "Are movie theaters dead?" And I was like, "Look at the box office for Scream." Like anyone could hear me.
It's true though. It's really true. I think there's maybe in the UK a very particular idea of horror. Maybe I don't know. I don't really know what it is. Maybe it's just a TV thing. Whereas in the US, maybe there's people are just more open-minded, and all facets and all types of horror is appreciated. Potentially,
maybe. I honestly don't know.
I don't know.
America's open-minded about it.
Yes, exactly. Ding, ding, ding.
Ways to kill people. Potentially.
Well, I'm curious about, like, have you been a slasher fan for, I mean, I'm assuming maybe, but like, what's your relationship to the slasher genre / to horror genre in general?
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan from a very young age. And it's kind of been an obsession of mine in the UK to get a show away that was slasher. With Rec, I would say, it's a funny one. It's series 2 for sure is a full-blown slasher.
Okay.
I've never killed so many people in so many different ways, and it's really intense. I sort of knew with series 1, because slashers aren't a big thing in the UK, I had to kind of like try not to spoil the show for you again. Kind of
appreciate it.
Kind of like lure people into a false sense of security in the UK at least before it goes full-blown slasher. So kind of I would say series 1 is more murder mystery with slasher elements, maybe. I don't know. In general, I'm just a huge horror fan, and so series 1 is an amalgamation of all kinds of horror that I love in there. Slasher probably is what's leading, but yeah, always been a huge slasher fan. And our director, Chris Ball.
Oh yeah, I was really happy to see him involved because I had seen his film that also stars
Jack Rowan.
Jack Rowan. Yeah. And so I was like, ooh, he's directing it. And I think he directs every episode, right?
Yes, he did, which again doesn't happen very often in the UK, but we were kind of aware that like we're going as big as we can, and we want this to feel really kind of authored. And yeah, so we managed to, I mean, he nearly died making it. The schedule was insane.
I can imagine. It
really, yeah. And what was nice was Chris, we filmed in Belfast, and Chris kind of has this crew that go with him everywhere. And a lot of the crew I think had worked on his feature Boys from County Hell as well. So they're all genre fans, and they all kind of understood the assignment straight away.
Hell yeah.
That's
helps. Awesome.
Yeah, and we got everyone, the team's back together for series 2, which is exciting.
Oh, good. He's back as the director?
Yeah, Chris is directing the first block, so the first 3 episodes. And he was like, I don't think I can direct the whole thing again without kind of, collapsing.
Yeah.
And so we have another director directing the second block.
Okay.
That's all just sort of being finalized. But yeah, another really, really cool director.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying not to talk about series 2 too much. I'm going to spoil everything.
I know. I'm sorry. I wanted to I was hoping to get more done with what we're doing, but we just are so far behind in our writing that I just I couldn't.
There are some big twists kind of towards the second half of the series, which again was I love those moments when you think a show is one thing and then whoosh. I mean, it's more of a thing that works in film, but yeah, there are some big twists in the second half of the series.
I can't
which
wait.
take you in a direction, hopefully, that you had no idea it was going. And now I'm definitely saying too much. But
well, let's take it back to childhood. What was your introduction to horror? Do you remember?
Yeah, when I think back, I think it was The Sixth Sense.
Okay.
First, I suppose horror light, maybe in a way, but also it's pretty terrifying.
Oh, I think it's a horror film.
That's scary. That's definitely a horror movie. Those ghosts, all the ghost sequences are horrific.
Really horrific. I think that was one of the first things I vividly remember. So I looked exactly like the kid.
Oh, really?
He must have been roughly the same age as well. And I was like the spitting image of him. You couldn't
No
tell
way.
Yeah, and I think that enhanced the terror. I remember we went on a vacation once to somewhere random, like I think it was somewhere in the Lake District, like in the middle of nowhere in England. And we were on this boat, and there was a huge group of Italian tourists on there. They were all like, it was like a school group, and they went crazy because they thought I was. I think it wasn't that long after the film had come out. They thought I was him.
Oh no!
But obviously there was like a language barrier. I didn't really know what they wanted from me. And they were taking pictures, and so I looked just like him. So that film was like watching like a biopic that I never knew existed, I guess.
You're in someone's vacation photo album that they met Haley Joel Osment, and there's pictures of you in someone's family photo album. Stories are told about you to this day.
That happened once before. I must just look like a lot of different people. I was in a nightclub in London, and some American tourists were convinced that I was Neville Longbottom.
So when you said that, I was like, I wonder if he's going to say Neville Longbottom. I really did.
It was Neville, and I hadn't like really checked in with Neville for a long time, so I just immediately thought like Neville in the first film. I was like, I don't know what. But I went with it, and they were taking photographs, and then more of their friends came over, and I just wish I could have been a fly on the wall when they got home and looked at the pictures, and were just completely disappointed.
That's hilarious.
But The Sixth Sense was one of the first, yeah, for sure. I remember like, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I think I caught it on TV. It's the scene with the girl in the tent.
That scene
I was going to choose The Sixth Sense as my film, but I saw somebody had done it, and someone beat me to it. But the film, yeah, the moment where she like vomits or something.
She does. The camera is so good on that, where it's like watching as the tent unfolds, and then it comes down, and she's sitting there, and then she just vomits.
The heads are like pop, 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 and then all over. Yeah, and the lights, like he's got a torch or something, and it's on his face, and it's really bright, and and there's another bit where like there's like a woman in a dressing gown, and she's holding pills or something. It's funny the things you remember that aren't actually what happened in the film. I seem to remember she was holding pills, and she
slit her wrists. She had cut her wrists, and she like, look what you made me do in the kitchen, because that part, I think, because that part got me as a kid, because she turns around in the kitchen, and I remember I watched it on TV as a kid, and her wrist, there's nothing on her wrist, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And it was the edited version, so they didn't show you, so it didn't make sense. But yeah, I think that's what it's fucked up, whatever is happening in that part. It is very, yes.
That's so funny that they edited the wrists out, like the scars. That's mad.
The things they do on American television when they edit,
weird,
it's wild.
That's so strange. But yeah, that film was definitely. My dad also looked a bit like Bruce Willis as well. I'm not making that up.
So oh my god, you and your dad walking
around. So that was one. There was also a TV series that no one seems to remember. It was called The Spooks of Bottle Bay, and it was like a kids series, a puppet thing, very similar to. Do you remember Channel Zero?
Yeah.
Candle Cove? I get confused because there's Cabot Cove.
The first with the toothy boy and the weird channel. Yeah,
and it's like there's a puppet kid show that no one else seems to remember, except that's what it is like with this show, but it's on YouTube. Wow. It's a real thing, and it was this kid show and it was about ghosts and stuff, and it was like a fever dream. It was terrifying. But no one seems to have ever seen it.
I've never even heard of this. I'm pulling it up right now.
My mum just used to stick the VHS on them, and I'm like, it just explains so much. Like, where the hell did you find this tape? In like some basement. So that was a big one.
Wow.
When you pick up some scratches, cause you want a fun break, the playful way you scratch is the next choice you should make. You can make your dog's leg kick and scratch with that. You could even grab a laser pointer and use your cat. You can build yourself a homemade scratching machine, or use a piece from your chess set. Go ahead, grab the queen. Scratch like a DJ with your record player. A cactus could scratch off that scratchable layer. Cause when it comes to scratching, there's a million playful ways. Thanks to scratchers from the California Lottery, a little play can make your day.
Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase, play, or claim.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
Since we're on talking about things that scared you as a kid, let's talk about your pick.
Uh-huh.
Right? What movie did you pick for your Scarred for Life pick for us to talk about today?
I picked Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the film.
Hell yes. So for those of you, yes, this is the 1992 film, everybody, not the show. And in the film, flighty teenage girl Buffy Summers learns that she is her generation's destined battler of vampires, aka a slayer.
Flighty. I love that. Flighty.
That's courtesy of IMDb.
Like
IMDb.
Non-committal Buffy. That's funny.
Yeah.
There's one specific scene in that film that I remember as a kid, late night TV. And like looking back now, I'm like, it's not actually remotely scary, but there's something about that film in general. The tone is so off and strange.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that I think really got under my skin. It just kind of like, it's just a fucking weird film, really.
It really is. It is tonally very weird. But so how old were you when you saw this? How did you see it? So you mentioned kind of a scene that looking back isn't that scary, but what was that scene? Give us kind of your horror story.
So the scene is it's David Arquette at the window, hovering at the window. He's just been turned into a vampire like a couple of hours ago and has quickly gone to Luke Perry's apartment. Luke Perry looks magnificent in this film as well.
Yes, he sure does.
Yes.
It's a lot. He had like a 3-picture deal. I love shit like that. Like I didn't realize that was still a thing in the 90s, but he had a 3-picture deal with whoever the studio was. And he was trying to diversify and do something kind of like funny and step out. And this was what he picked to do because he kind of liked that his character was the damsel in distress, which good for him. I think that's like, it might not have panned out as a choice, but I think he's great in the film. Anyway, he's in bed, and then like there's a tap at the window, and David Arquette's kind of hovering there, and he makes a scary vampire. He's got a really fucked up kind of like.
He's a great vampire, and does he have?
I was surprised how good of a vampire he was.
Teeth?
Yeah, big teeth,
gold fangs. Isn't? Because I kept like I didn't notice it till the very end. I was like, wait, does he have gold fangs? I love that little design choice.
And he's like, come outside, or I'm really hungry. And there's just something about that scene. I don't know what it was. I just remember as a child. I think I was really young. I must have been like 12. Just having this fear that someone was going to appear at my window in the same way. And looking back now, the scene doesn't really have the same teeth. But
it's interesting though, because that scene is kind of an homage to Salem's Lot. Have you ever seen Salem's Lot?
Yes, yeah.
With the little kid floating outside the window, and he's like, "Let me in," rapping on the window, which is a scene that has terrified a generation of people back then. So I love that this homage also kind of affected you as a kid.
Yeah, probably not done as well as Salem's Lot either, really, but
it's fun. It's funny. I think David Arquette is great in this too.
He's really good in it. It makes you really like. There are a couple of actors in. I mean, the cast in this film is insane. Yeah. Like when Ben Affleck like pops up for like a line,
random second, right? I was like, wow.
Apparently, he said it was one of his first gigs, I think, and he was really excited because he had a lot more, but he was basically cut from the film. He didn't know that. He kind of went to watch it, and
no, poor guy. Hilary Swank is in it as like one of the Valley Girl gang, which I love.
Get out of my facial.
Yeah, oh my god. It's weird, like it should like some of the jokes just kind of like fall off a cliff, don't they? It's really strange. But then
it's especially the language, because like it's so funny because it's very obviously Valley Girl. And I feel like we don't really make fun of that. Like Valley Girls, I feel like aren't really a thing anymore in popular culture. Like we don't have the like Terry and I are talking about this. Like it's got Clueless vibes, but this was before Clueless, and it's got the very much like as if, or like like get out of my facial, or what's the sitch? And I'm like, did people actually talk like this, or does Joss Whedon just like make up like the vernacular of what teenage girls sounded like? And Los
Yeah,
Angeles.
did he create a lot of that through this false idea of what did they call it? They're like mole dolls, right? That's what like mole dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Were they a thing? I don't know.
I have no idea. I grew up in the center of the country, so of the United States. So like none of this. When I was a kid watching this all felt alien to me because this definitely was not how it was in Nebraska in the middle of the country.
It's just such a strange. There's like a feel. I remember as a kid just feeling there was this sickly. Now when I watch it, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But I think a lot of the scenes with this film has one of the best death scenes ever. I think in it, Paul Rubens' death.
It's so good.
That was Paul, and I knew Paul Rubens was in this, but I was like, wait, is that Paul Rubens? Like, I'm so used to him playing such ridiculous characters, and like, obviously his character is like a ridiculous vampire, but it was much more like serious, and I feel like I've seen him play in a lot of things, which is saying something for this character. So it was like weird seeing him like that.
It was a weird choice as well, because I think he had just had that scandal, the incident.
He's had a number of incidents, unfortunately, because there was this before, and then when I was looking him up for prep of this in the 2000s, he was arrested for child pornography.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah, because he apparently is a big collector of like antique erotic art, and apparently he bought a big bulk of it, and some of the stuff in there were studies of nude teens from like. A long time ago, and so he got put on a registry for 3 years, and it's like you're seeing this and it's like holy shit. And then also that like Christy Swanson, she's like a pro-Trumper. She was in a film called Obamagate, in which they're like it's just I'm like, what is going on with this movie? Because you have them, and then of course Joss Whedon, who was really huge in the 90s, and then now it's like things are starting to come out about his behavior on sets, and it's like, wow, 3 different kind of problematic public figures in this movie.
Yeah. I love that, like, all that had just happened, and Paul kind of clearly thought, what's the best film I could do now to clear up my image?
A campy horror comedy called Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
In which I'm playing a fey and effeminate vampire.
Right?
It was apparently written for a woman. No, he's fantastic in this.
He is.
And you mentioned his death scene. I love his death scene and how protracted it is, and that it continues into the credits. Like, it's so good. And I remember they used that in the trailer, one of the trailers I saw. And so when I saw the trailers for this when I was a kid, TV spots or whatever, and they had the
all right.
like that moment in there, and I was like, I really want to see this. My dad rented it because my dad is a huge vampire fan, and I remember sitting down to watch it with him, and we got maybe 15 minutes in, and he said, this is stupid, and turned it off. And so I was like, I wanted to watch it because I'm this little queer closeted boy, and I'm like, there's something about this that is like speaking to me. And so I remember sneaking the tape after they'd gone to bed and watching it in my room and just loving this movie.
I think it, like, on the camp scale, it's definitely like, it's up there, right? Mm-hmm. I think that probably was a part of it for me as well. Like, I was attracted to that without even realizing, like, it's kind of magnetically camp in every possible way imaginable. Like, every possible way. Yeah, that probably was a part of it, I think. It's really colorful as well, and it's kind of, but that tonal, like, it's so off kilter. I don't think it's a deliberate thing. I think it's just a little bit all over the place, but that adds to the strangeness to me, I think.
Well, and I think because I was looking into it, and I mean, Joss has had, like, I don't know, sometimes when he talks about projects that either the public isn't very fond of, or that maybe he wasn't too fond of, he gets a little arrogant. But I do think that some of the disconnect here might be he wrote it one way, and then I think the director directed it a different way and added a little bit of layers of camp to it, because he left the production midway through because he was angry with what they were doing with it. And so he's like, I want to be more involved. And I thought there's a quote when he talked to IGN a few years ago where he says, I thought they were fucking up, and I thought they should have filmed some of the things that I wrote. I thought they should have let me into the process. And so he left the production of it and being involved with it. And so I'm wondering if that kind of tonal disconnect might be because some of the things that he had in there, he was like talking about how he referenced Michelangelo's Pieta, and like it was very self-serious, and I don't think the production necessarily took that route and made it a little bit more campy. And so I'm wondering if that might be kind of that weird tonal disconnect that we're seeing, where it's like maybe the source material was a bit more serious, and then they decided to add that layer of humor to it.
Is that why they did the series? Is that why he ended up doing this show? Because I feel like the show is so, like, I will say this: I've not watched a lot of Buffy. I'm not a big the show person. I'm sorry, everybody. I should watch the show, but I haven't. But either. Just like I know, and I knew that these were very different, obviously, but like so incredibly different. Like especially with who Buffy is as a character, it's just very interesting about like how this movie became that show. And so hearing that about Joss Whedon, that like I wonder if he like wanted to make the show the way he wanted to.
I remember him saying something about Donald Sutherland as well. Who again, Donald Sutherland in this film is in a different film to everyone else.
And he really is.
Exactly. And I love it so much.
I don't know what they were going for. But apparently Donald Sutherland didn't, and all of his lines, he didn't say a single line that was written. He kind of rewrote the whole thing. So that probably is slightly why it feels like he's in a different world. But also he probably, I wonder, this film, like, now we know what we know about Joss Whedon and how he's kind of a difficult customer and maybe doesn't play well with others. Like, was that happening right at the start? And is that, was that a contributing factor to? I can't imagine he would have loved that a woman was directing his film. I don't know. I could be wrong, but now what we know, it makes you wonder what was actually going on. We've always kind of just, because the film did okay as well. It's thought of as a flop, but it did fine.
I thought that too, because I remember reading that it was a flop and it did really poorly, but it didn't seem like it did that terribly.
Critics were okay with it, I think, and like it wasn't this big disaster that people think of it as. It just wasn't what he wanted. I remember. And I know
he originally wanted to direct it. He had written this as like a directing vehicle for him, and then when it went from like this indie, very small budget film to getting Luke Perry and getting a big budget, a little bit bigger of a budget, I should say, attached to it. They went to looking for a different director. So I do think there's a little bit of animosity there. And I hadn't known this about him until his reaction to Alien Resurrection, a script that he had also written, where he said that movie's a hot mess.
It's a hot mess, but it's so good.
But I remember seeing a quote of him in the future where he was looking back on the film, and he said the problem wasn't the script. The problem was that the way they filmed the script, or the way the actors did this. Like, he was really trying to, like, again, hoist off the blame from his script into it was other people's fault. My thing was great. It was their interpretation of it that made it all terrible. And so I see this and I'm like, and I had saw that. And then when I went to go do research for this and I see that again, I was like, ooh, maybe he does not play well with others.
No. Or like he somehow kind of, I don't know, if it's one of his first gigs, like, it's okay that it's not great.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like, you've grown.
You're allowed to make like not great art all the time. Like, I feel like everyone,
yes,
it's just a thing that you're allowed to do. Also, Alien Resurrection script is ridiculous, and that's okay. I love that movie because it is so ridiculous.
Do you think in Buffy he wrote the cheerleading chants? If so, he doesn't have a leg to stand on.
He really doesn't. Loosey goosey is that?
Like, how funky is your chicken? How loose is your
goose? Oh, like, my God.
Yes.
Well, and also just watching this, I have a lot of feelings about the female characters, which I between Joss Whedon as a person and just watching this, because Terry and I were talking about this. It's like the female characters are all ditzy. They're all just like stupid, and they're talking about like climate change / global warming in language that is very 1992. But she's like, bugs are ruining the planet, and it's all very vapid. And I know that the guys are also vapid, and everyone in this movie is kind of just like a goofball. But it's just very interesting to have like all of these kind of dumb female characters. Then you have her who becomes like, despite her being a dumb woman, like is able to become the Slayer. And I guess there's just something about it that kind of like doesn't super sit well with me. I know it is the early 90s, and I'm watching this for the first time in 2023, but I'm like, ooh, something's weird here. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, it
It's
does
like
not sit well.
the configuration was off, and then it worked in the TV series, like incredibly so.
Were you a
Yeah.
fan? Were you a fan of the TV series? Have you seen?
Yeah, that was another big formative thing. I remember very clearly, like sneaking and watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and just that literally had me in a chokehold.
Because I know for a lot of women and also a lot of queer people, the kind of themes of outsiderness and of like a little bit of I've never seen it, so I don't really have any attachment to it. But I know a lot of queer people, it was a formative experience for them.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's again, it's not remotely there in the film. I think the mum in the film, she does have a few good lines. She has like 3 lines, and then do you remember she's like heading out and leaving Buffy at home, and she says, what does she say? She says, Erica says, or something like that, rather than like kissing her daughter. Erica says, and leaves. I think that's one thing that is amazing in the film is the relationship between Buffy and her mum. And I think it's almost, when you watch back now, I didn't really necessarily pick up on it at the time, but in the TV show, Joyce is so unaccepting of Buffy's lifestyle choice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's very like, to be honest, it's very overt, actually, the metaphor. But I don't know, I didn't pick up on it as a kid, but it's completely like, she wants her to just ignore her calling and
be normal.
Yeah, be normal. And why can't you,
In quotes.
the girls? Yeah, and just kind of, and Buffy's like, she has to be herself. She has to follow her calling, and her mum is just very, very like ashamed. And it takes a long time for Joyce, the mum, to kind of come to terms with who Buffy is.
Oh, interesting.
So that's in there. I think there was one gay guy in the writers' room, I think, and to be fair, I remember him saying that Joss was very aware of what was going on in terms of the kind of queer subtext, and really pushed for it. And actually, this writer, I can't remember his name. What was it? He said something brilliant. I said, that makes so much sense. I can't remember what it was now, but it was Joss was very aware of the queer subtext, and he very much like pushed for that wherever possible, which is amazing, really. You wouldn't have thought that.
No, but I think that's what makes him such a complicated person, because there's this real life situation with like the things that are coming out about what he said on the sets of Buffy or on the set of the Justice League, I believe it was. And so there's that, but then there's also like this, I mean, I guess in a way it's sort of like how people view J.K. Rowling now, right? Where it's like there's something that is very big for people, and then there's the public persona that is maybe not as great. But I do think that there's something about the queer subtext within Buffy and some of the things that he went on to do later that is, for a lonely queer teen, maybe closeted, especially in the 90s, dealing with that. I think that there's something really powerful about that show, even though there are a lot of issues.
Yeah. The kind of the found family thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm pretty sure at one point Buffy's mum throws her out of the house. She's like,
oh, wow.
Buffy kind of comes out as a Slayer, and her mum's like, no, and throws her out. And so she kind of really relies on the friends that she's made who love her for who she is. So that's really powerful.
It really is.
It's just then, unfortunately, when you get further into the show, you have it's quite notorious, the big bury your gays moment with Willow, and you kind of think, on the one hand, I know how difficult it was for them to even have 2 queer characters on a primetime show like that at that time. I remember Alison Hannigan's talked a lot about how, like, there were scenes where Angel and Buffy were like open mouth kissing, dry humping on a gravestone, and she couldn't even really hold Tara's hand or peck her on the cheek in the right way, and it was very kind of like mad. So like he kind of think, good for them for trying, and they got it wrong, I think, but like attempts were made, and I kind of appreciate that.
You mentioned the mother though in the movie, and one of my favorite scenes. There are a couple scenes in here that really made me cackle, and one of my favorite is when Buffy comes home late and her mom is like, "What time is it?" And you think it's going to be like the mom, like, "Do you know what time it is, young lady?" And she's like, "It's like 10." She's like, "Oh, we're late. My clock isn't working." Like it's so funny because it's like such a reversal of expectations of the mom role being sort of like, "Where have you been, young lady?" type of thing. And that moment made me cackle. But then the other one is the moment that scared you as a kid. I love that Luke Perry's character Pike, his reaction to Benny floating outside his room is like, "Go home, Benny." And he's like, "I'm hungry." And he's like, "You're floating. Come on, man." It's such a funny line because again, any real world reaction to this, if you see your best friend floating outside your room with like fangs, I'm like, what the fuck? But his reaction is like, "Go home." It's almost like, "Go home, you're drunk."
Yeah, literally. He's like, that's so true. I wonder if that made it scarier for me when I was a kid as well, that it wasn't sort of the melodramatic response. It was like a strange off-kilter response to, I don't know.
My favorite line is when the head vampire goes, "I want to go to a dance." And instead of just killing everyone immediately, he's like, "Let's just wait till tomorrow. I want to go dancing." And I was like, I love a vampire with his priorities straight. I love again, very, very camp and gay to me about being like, I want to go to a dance. Like, I'll save my murder to have like a big set piece at a teenage dance. And I just think that is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's just, this movie's ridiculous. And I'm very glad I saw it. And I was watching it. My husband was like, "I really want to watch that." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I've heard it's kind of fun." I'm like, "It is pretty fun. It's stupid, but like, it's really fun and silly." And I kind of love Donald Sutherland being in a very serious vampire movie, while Christy Swanson is very much not in that movie. And it is just very good. I would watch a bunch more movies with the two of them together. I will say I love them as a pair.
Yeah, she's really good in it, isn't she? It's a shame that she's like, gone down the path she's gone down. But she's
She's some great lines, man. I want to graduate high school, move to Paris, marry Christian Slater, and die. Like iconic bucket list. I really respect a woman who knows what she wants.
Yeah. She's really great with Luke Perry. They do have really good chemistry. They really do.
They do.
They do.
He's the only character that doesn't really carry over to the film, to the TV series. Well, there is a Spike, and his character in the film is Pike.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Joss likes Ikes. I don't know. He is that. There's no Willow either, but yeah. There's just, I think it's sort of like, there are moments where it's like kind of gross out comedy, but it doesn't quite land, and then it's kind of serious. And then you have like a flashback to like medieval Europe
with really bad sets.
It's so bad, like porn bad. It was like, and it just unsettles.
It does.
Like what? Rutger Hauer kind of just like camping around.
What a great vampire he is.
Oh, that was Rutger Hauer. I was like, I know who this is. I saw it in the credits and like just didn't connect the dots, because it's so funny seeing Rutger Hauer again as a campy vampire. Like, we're so used to seeing him in serious roles, and he's just like in terrible makeup in that out. Like, he looks like a spirit Halloween Dracula, and I love it.
He keeps popping up. I'm not as clued up on my sort of vampiric history, but I don't know if Dracula played the violin, but every time Rutger Hauer's in this film, he's just casually playing a violin for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Well, it's just, I think it's just a great character moment. I'm a huge fan of vampires. I've seen a lot of the vampire movies. I don't remember ever seeing like a vampire with a violin, but it just feels right. It feels right. You're like, of course he's got a violin. Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
He's cultured,
artsy,
or something. Artsy. He wears a cravat. Of course he'd have a violin on hand.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like one of the moments that sticks out to me again. It's like, what the fuck is this film? Is when the at the end of the film, when like, there are all the dead vampires and dead students all over the floor of the gym, and the head teacher, the principal, is like giving everyone detention
slips.
Hilary Swank is like, oh my god, she's saying something about, oh, don't let Buffy back in. She's kind of turned on her. She was her friend, but she's like, no, being really annoying, and he just like
throws her into the wall.
Knocks her out. Like, it just doesn't work, but you can't look away.
Right.
Exactly. It's like makes no sense, but I love it. It's just I think it feels like it knows it doesn't make sense. It's just kind of weird, and I loved it.
I'd love to know which day, like what point Joss walked off set. Like what scene was that?
I do wonder as well, because like, so Mary Beth, you mentioned the line about graduating high school, yada yada yada, right, and wanting to marry Christian Slater and the dying. I guess the original line in the script was wanting to marry Charlie Sheen. And I'm like, okay, that feels a little bit more out of touch with like teens than like Christian Slater, who was doing Heathers. And there's like all of that, like, you know, he was a big commodity coming into the 90s. And so there was that change. And then the other change I know for sure that was added by the director was the final dance between Pike and Buffy, where he says, I saved you a dance. She's like, are you going to ask me? And he's like, I suppose you want to lead. And she says, no. And he says, me neither. That was all not originally in the script. And I think it's such a interesting way to end it, because it's like they're both like seeing each other as equals, and it's like, do you want to lead? No, we're not, none of us are going to lead. We're just going to share this moment. And it's such a I don't know, it's such a fitting ending to this movie that I'm curious how it would have ended with Joss's original script.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to. I don't think there's such a thing as a bad movie, more or less, right? So I'm hesitant to say this is bad. It's like, I would say there's a really good film in there that isn't quite emerge. It's very neutral of me, but it's fun.
It is.
Yeah.
And without it, we wouldn't have got the masterpiece that is the TV series. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, that cultural zeitgeist of that is because of this movie, honestly. And to Joss, maybe the failing of this movie is the reason that we have that. And I think that's interesting. Before we do wrap up, though, some of the dialogue, some of the lines in here are really great. And I know this is going to tie into our rating, but the line when the very beginning, when we have like all of these characters going about and living their life, and there's news reports and they're talking about people being murdered and whatnot. And one of the news reporters says that what's happening, what's these dead bodies have what looks like a really gross hickey on them. And it's such that line, just the fact there's a news reporter saying this and saying it with a straight face, and just basically, it looks like there's a lot of really gross hickeys. It makes me laugh so hard.
Yeah. I think my favorite line is when Merrick, I think that's his name, Donald Sutherland's character, is like, I've searched the world for you, Buffy. I've spent forever trying to find you to give you your birthright. And she's like, my birthright? Is that like a trust fund?
Yes.
So good. But like, I love it. I really do.
Oh, it's so good. All right, well, let's wrap this up and give this a rating out of 5. Terry, how many really gross hickeys out of 5 do you give Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
You know, it's hard because like I enjoyed watching this. I enjoyed watching it more as a kid. Because I remember that night just like trying to not laugh really loud because my room was right next to my parents, and I'm trying to watch this, and it felt like I wasn't supposed to because my dad just like completely shit on it. And so like I remember watching this and just really being taken, and I think probably resonating with the kind of otherness aspect of this movie, because I do think there is some of that in here as well. So it really resonated with me as a kid. Now I think it's kind of funny. It kind of feels a little bit of like Clueless meets vampires in a way, even though Clueless again came out after this movie. So I don't know. I enjoyed it. I think it's fun. I'm going to give it 3 gross hickeys for me. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm also going to give it 3 really gross hickeys. I had a lot of fun watching it. I know it's not a good movie, but I think it is a very good relic of 1992. I had a lot of fun watching it. It's just silly and campy and ridiculous, and I just think it's a good time. And then Ryan, you have the final word. How many really gross hickeys out of 5 do you give Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I'm going to give, purely for legacy and what came after, 3.5. Okay. Can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do whatever you want.
And a half.
You can do whatever you want.
What's a half a hickey, though? It's like half your mouth on.
I mean, it's like a half-assed hickey, not a full. Never mind. Anyway, we won't go into
Could be something your doctor should look at. Could be a hickey.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us to talk about your TV show and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Where can the listeners find you, and what The floor is yours. What do you want to plug? What do you have to share that you can talk about?
So Rec is available right now on Hulu if you're in the US, and it's on the BBC in the UK. And yeah, please watch it and reach out to me. Let me know what you think of the show, as long as you only have glowing praise. On Twitter or Instagram, I'm at Brown J Ryan. My name backwards. A lot of thought went into that handle.
So, listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What did you think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie? You can let us know via email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the children! Somebody please think of the children! Somebody please think of the children!
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system. If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served. Hi, I'm Detective Dave. I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood. So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished. From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.